After doing countless fantasy drafts this summer, I have found 10 wide receivers that I believe are going to win leagues in 2025 fantasy football. Inside today's video, we're going to be going in depth into each of these 10 wide receivers, and by the end of today's video, you will know exactly why you need to draft all of them in your 2025 fantasy football drafts. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you are new to the channel and you don't have enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. So without further ado, let's get into my 10 wide receivers that will win leagues in 2025. We begin with my first league-winning wide receiver, and that is going to be Malik Nabers of the New York Football Giants. Current ADP from ESPN, NFL, CBS, and Sleeper have him as the wide receiver 6 at pick number 11. Last year, he was the wide receiver 6 on the season in PPR, as well as in points per game. Now, if Malik Nabers is just able to get a little bit more consistent this season, then I believe there is no reason as to why Malik Nabers couldn't finish as the wide receiver number 1 in fantasy football. This is a guy that had some truly phenomenal performances last season. 28.7 PPR points up against the Commanders, 28.2 up against the Cleveland Browns, 23.1 up against the Dallas Cowboys, up against the Ravens, he dropped 24.2, and up against the Indianapolis Colts in week number 17, he put belt to ass 36.1 PPR points as the wide receiver number 2 on the week. And he did this with subpar quarterback play with guys like Daniel Jones and horsecock Drew Lock. Now, I fully understand that Russell Wilson probably isn't the long-term answer for the Giants, and Russell Wilson is far from that quarterback that he was all those years ago in Seattle, but frankly, he is 100% going to be an upgrade based upon the quarterback play from last season. And if Malik Nabers was able to play that well with some absolute bums at the quarterback position, imagine what he is going to do with Russell Wilson. This is a guy that in 15 games had 170 targets second at wide receiver. That's 11.3 targets per game. He had 109 receptions, 7.3 per game. He ranked 3rd in terms of receptions. 7th in receiving yards, 1,204, 80.3 per game, and he scored 7 total touchdowns, 20th with the 1st in dominator rating in terms of efficiency, and 10th in yards per team pass attempt. There is a reason why I talked up Malik Nabers last summer. I told you to draft him, and if you drafted him, you were laying haymakers into your opponents in fantasy football. There's a reason why he was touted so highly coming out of college at LSU, and there's a reason why I'm giving him the metaphorical gawk gawk 9,000 yet again. It is because while Malik Nabers might not be in the best situation, this is a team that's going to be down late in games, having to throw the ball a ton, which is giving us extra garbage time points for Malik Nabers. Now, I understand that he is currently banged up. Jordan Brandon was told by a source that Malik Nabers, who was held out of both joint practices versus the Jets, is dealing with a separate injury not related to his previous toe and shoulder injury. He adds that his source told him that it is a minor thing and that he's going to be good. So I am not worrying right now. If we fast forward to late August, early September, you're doing your fantasy drafts and Malik Nabers might be potentially out for week 1, it's time to smash onto the brakes and potentially worry. But as of right now, to me, there is no need to worry. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but I believe Malik Nabers' upside is incredible. It is the moon. It is the wide receiver number 1 on the season. Next up, we move to another former LSU wide receiver. We got BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Duval, wide receiver 8 off the board right now at pick 15, the 203, the 3rd pick inside the 2nd round if you are in a 12-team league. Now, I think there's a very strong argument to be made that BTJ should be going inside of the 1st round. He was really that phenomenal in his rookie season. Wide receiver 4 on the year, wide receiver 12 in points per game. He put up such great numbers and only played in 7 games with Trevor Lawrence. The other 10 games were with Mac Jones. He was 14th in targets, 12th in receptions, 3rd in receiving yards, and 5th in total touchdowns with 10. Now, this tweet right here is going to perfectly sum up exactly why BTJ is going to smash in 2025. Only Jamar Chase scored more points from weeks 13 on after the Jags bye week. In those weeks, BTJ averaged 22.9 points per game. He was special to end the season, and it was with Mac Jones. What a rookie year for Brian Thomas Jr. PFF Fantasy tweets. Regular season, wide receiver 4. Fantasy playoffs, wide receiver number 1. He put up those gigantic numbers with the 50th highest target accuracy. He was 8th in yards per route run, 15th in yards per target, 9th in yards per team pass attempt, and 2nd in dominator rating. I believe heavily that Liam Cohen is going to be able to give this offense a metaphorical pack-a-punch to be able to level up this offense. And while I am still not 100% sold on Trevor Lawrence as a whole, I do think Trevor Lawrence is way better than Mac Jones. So I think Brian Thomas Jr. is set up for not a sophomore slump, an elite second year in the NFL. So even with the addition of the Heisman, Travis Hunter, I still believe BTJ is the clear alpha wide receiver on this team, and I believe he's going to put up yet another huge season. Now we move to Drizzy Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons, ADP wide receiver 10 at pick 22, the 10th pick inside of the second round in 12-team leagues. And I've talked about Drake London so heavily recently, so I'm going to give you guys kind of the Spark Notes version of how I normally talk about Drake London. Now, Drake London has been a guy that I have been talking up for years, but over the years, Drake London has been basically fucked over by the quarterback play on the team. And while I don't necessarily think Michael Penix Jr. is guaranteed to be the franchise guy in Atlanta, kind of like we talked about how, who knows, really, Russell Wilson kind of just a one-year rental for the Giants, Michael Penix could be that guy. I'm just not fully sold on it. But when Drake London and Michael Penix Jr. played together, magic happened last season. In those 3 games, he had 8 targets, 13 targets, and 18 targets. It is very, very evident that Michael Penix Jr. trusts Drake London, and they are going to be a connection like Shaq and Kobe, right? Like LeBron and D Wade. This is going to be a elite connection for fantasy football because the ball is going to be forced down the throat of Drake London. This motherfucker scored 40.7 fantasy points up against the Carolina Panthers in Week 18. I fully understand that he's probably not going to be getting 13 plus targets every single game, but as long as he's getting 10 plus targets in a majority of games, Drake London is going to have a legitimate feast game in and game out because, again, the talent has always been there. The quarterback position has just been kind of taking a shit on the chest of Drake London. Last season, he was 10th in yards per route run, 12th in yards per team pass attempt, 5th in EPA, and 12th in fantasy points per route run. The most contested catches in the NFL since 2023 is Drake London with 39. So with Michael Penix Jr., the ceiling is incredibly high for Drake London. He's another guy that I could definitely see finishing as the wide receiver number 1. Next up, we got Tyreek Hill, wide receiver 13 off the board at pick 31, the 7th pick inside of the 3rd round on the Miami Dolphins. Now, before you say it, I know Tyreek Hill had 5 kids last year and he only scored 4 touchdowns. I think he is going to score a whole lot more touchdowns this season. Now, Tyreek Hill's another guy that's dealing with an injury. It's an oblique injury, and according to Sports MD analysis, the oblique injury, Coach McDaniel implies they're protecting him from himself/re-injury. Most wide receivers will be back by week 1, so there's really no need to panic as of right now on Tyreek Hill. Now, a lot of you guys got absolutely face-fucked by Tyreek Hill last season. Had you have drafted him, you left feeling very, very bad because Tyreek Hill was a complete and utter disaster, even when Tua Tagovailoa was healthy. But it's important to understand that while the Dolphins offense was very dysfunctional last season, there is reason to believe that they could potentially have a very big bounce back. If you just look at Tyreek Hill's career as a whole, he starts off his career as the wide receiver 32 in points per game, and then in 2024, he was the wide receiver 29 in points per game. Sandwiched in between that was straight up greatness. 2023, wide receiver 2, 2022, wide receiver 3, 2021, wide receiver 6, 2020, wide receiver 2, 2019, wide receiver 11, 2018, wide receiver 4, 2017, wide receiver 7. So what is more likely? That Tyreek Hill, who is dealing with a wrist injury all season and dealing with a quarterback carousel, is completely and utterly washed? Or is Tyreek Hill just kind of a victim of what happened last year to the Dolphins for fantasy football for NFL purposes, and he is just going to bounce back? Because if you watch the games, if you look at how he looks, he still looks very fast. He still looks like he's getting open. The quarterback position really let him down last year. So if Tua Tagovailoa plays a full 17 games, Tyreek Hill can be the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. The guy was getting open. I fully understand that last year went berserk. It went awry. It went astray for Tyreek Hill. But if Tua Tagovailoa puts up 17 games, Tyreek Hill has that path towards league-breaking upside. He's one of the few wide receivers that could score 35 fantasy points in any given game, and no one would be shocked. The Dolphins' defense, in terms of the secondary, also sucks donkey cock, so they're going to have to throw the ball a ton late in games, giving further upside to Tyreek Hill. I fully believe Mike McDaniel is going to figure out what was wrong from last season and implement it this season. Otherwise, his ass is grass, and he is getting fired. If you look at the stats for Tyreek Hill last season with Tua versus without, I understand he wasn't elite with Tua, but he was the wide receiver 19 in points per game. Without Tua, he was the wide receiver number 61. In his time as a Miami Dolphin from 2022 to 2024, even with last year's shitstorm, he's been the wide receiver 4 in points per game, averaging 18.8 points per game. So I get it. He completely screwed the pooch last season, but I believe a bounce back is imminent for Tyreek Hill. Next up, we got Davante Adams of the Los Angeles Rams, current ADP wide receiver 17 at pick number 40, the 404. Wide receiver 11 in PPR last season, wide receiver 10 in PPR points per game. Now, before we talk about Davante Adams some more, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends, our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious, you will get your free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash, as well as receiving my draft guide as long as you deposit at least $10 and play through the funds. If you're new to Underdog and don't know what they do, they're the best ball platform in the world. You're thinking, Nick, what is best ball? Best ball is the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft and that's it. There is no season-long commitment. Every single week, Underdog automatically puts the highest scores into your lineup. So there's no trades, no waivers, and no in-season management. Their flagship contest is Best Ball Mania. $15 million in total prizes, $2 million to first place, $25 to enter. Make sure you guys do head on over to Underdog. Come draft with me, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. And if you guys would like access to my draft guide and you're already on Underdog or you don't want to join Underdog, check out the link in the video description on Patreon. $12.50. You get my full PPR and my half PPR rankings and cheat sheet. So back in with Davante Adams. Now, despite the fact that he joined a absolutely dysfunctional Jets organization last season, Davante Adams was able to leapfrog past Garrett Wilson as the wide receiver 1 on the Jets. He has had 9 straight seasons now as a top 15 points per game wide receiver, with 8 of 9 seasons inside of the top 12. Now, do I think that Puka Nacua is going to get stiff-armed to the side like Garrett Wilson did for Davante Adams to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense? Fuck no, baby. But I do believe this is a 1A and 1B situation, like in Cincinnati last year, right? You remember Jamar Chase was the Triple Crown winner. He was absolutely beating the ever-living shit out of defenses. The defenses stood no chance. He was open all game long, like 7-Eleven, 24/7 open, and yet T. Higgins was still eating as well. He was picking up the scraps, and he was doing great with it. So why couldn't Puka Nacua and Davante Adams do the exact same things, especially when Puka Nacua is not a guy that's known for scoring 8 gazillion touchdowns every single season, right? You know, in the red zone, Davante Adams is a very trustworthy asset. Now, the biggest question right now for Davante Adams is Matthew Stafford, and he's dealing with the back injury. Now, there are reports that he's going to be throwing today on Saturday. We will see how this ends up being ironed out, right? If you fast forward and you're in late August and Matthew Stafford's back is still fucked up, then you know what you do? You're going to fully fade Davante Adams, or at least just wait till he falls to a range where you're comfortable drafting him if Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback for a majority of the season, right? I wouldn't be all over Davante Adams if I thought Jimmy G was going to be the quarterback this season, but as of right now, that still seems like a little bit more of a question mark. And Matthew Stafford is a guy that has played through so many injuries in his career that it would be almost foolish to think that he's not doing everything possible to come back for week number 1. Last year, he was 13th in dominator rating, 17th in explosive rating. He ranked 9th in targets, 14th in receptions, 15th in receiving yards, and 13th in total touchdowns. He still had those huge games that you've come accustomed to with Davante Adams. Up against the Jaguars, the man scored 42.8 PPR points. He had multiple 20-plus point performances, and he even had one when he was on the fucking Raiders. So while Davante Adams is getting older, I don't think he's lost an ounce of his ability. I still believe he's one of the better receivers in the NFL. And I think if Matthew Stafford is healthy, Davante Adams is legalized bank robbery inside of the 4th round. Next up, we move to DK Metcalf of the Pittsburgh Steelers, ADP wide receiver 20 at pick 49, the 501 off of the board right now. Now, last year, DK Metcalf played in 15 games. He was in a loaded wide receiver room with JSN, Tyler Lockett, and himself. If you look at last year, it's a tale of 2 seasons. He plays weeks 1 through 7, and in week number 7, he gets hurt with a knee injury. After the injury, he slowed down drastically. Week 2 up against the Patriots, he scores 28.9 fantasy points. Week 3 up against the Dolphins, 20.4. Week 7 up against the Falcons. In the game he gets hurt, 19.9 fantasy points. After that, it was like we were watching a completely different wide receiver. He came nowhere close to putting up 28-ish points, even 20 points after that injury occurred. So knowing that DK Metcalf is fully healthy going into the season, and knowing the competition around him are guys like Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, and Bobby Tree's Robert Woods, the door is clearly wide open for DK Metcalf to be a certified smash. Now, I have been someone for years that has talked negatively about DK Metcalf because I thought that the wide receiver room was always too crowded in Seattle for Metcalf to truly rise to the crop and be that alpha wide receiver that we know he is built to be. I mean, this is a guy that looked like he's chiseled like a Greek god, right? And despite the fact that the guy's incredibly fast, he's built like a goddamn tank, he never really was able to find that much consistency at the NFL level, but I believe that consistency will come with Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh. I understand that Aaron Rodgers looked like a far cry from himself last season, but Aaron Rodgers is the kind of guy that will lock into a wide receiver one that he trusts, and DK Metcalf is exactly the type of wide receiver that Aaron Rodgers would lock into, especially, again, when you look at the other wide receivers on the depth chart, they can't hold the jockstrap of DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf on 20-plus yard targets last season, 15 receptions first, 5 touchdowns tied second, 96.4 receiver grade according to PFF second. So you don't think, right, like, I don't get why he is being drafted here. Don't we think that Rodgers is just going to feed him the ball deep down the field? Don't we understand that Rodgers is going to force the rock to Metcalf? I simply just don't get it. Unless you think DK Metcalf is just absolutely terrible and you can't take into consideration what happened with the knee injury and you're just assuming that Rodgers is completely useless, he's limp dick out there, then go ahead and fade him. But for me, as the wide receiver 20, I am going to be picking DK Metcalf in so many of my drafts. Next up, we got wide receiver number 7, Calvin Ridley of the Tennessee Titans, ADP wide receiver 30 at pick 69. Very nice. I like my name aboard at the 6.9. Now, if you had Calvin Ridley last year, it was a very frustrating experience. It was as frustrating as it gets. It's like when you swipe on a chick on Tinder, you show up and the Tinder pictures were 70 pounds ago, right? It is just immense disappointment because you want to play Calvin Ridley because you see games where he's scoring 24.7 points. You see games where he's dropping Carlton Davis off 22.6 fantasy points. You're seeing games where he goes crazy up against the Chargers, 25.4 fantasy points. But then there are games where he's literally scoring 0.9 fantasy points, 1.9 fantasy points, 2.5 fantasy points, and you have no idea what to do because Will Levis is completely terrorizing the upside and the safety of Calvin Ridley. Last season, Calvin Ridley ranked first in unrealized air yards with 1,097. This motherfucker put up 1,017 yards with a complete and utter bum at the quarterback position and had 1,097 unrealized air yards. A lot of the balls that were thrown his way were not even remotely catchable. Even Stretch Armstrong wouldn't be able to reach out of the stadium and catch some of the passes that Will Levis was throwing. Will Levis legitimately sabotaged the season that would have been greatness out of Calvin Ridley. 91st in target accuracy. Now, Cam Ward, it's his rookie season. There's going to be some bumps. There's going to be some ups and downs, but there's a reason why this guy was drafted numero 1 overall out of Miami, the U, right? There's a reason why he was a highly touted prospect. That's because he has the ability to throw the football, right? Which is something that Will Levis can only dream to have. Now, I don't want to shit too much on Will Levis because he's actually on the IR. He ended up getting hurt, and that sucks. So if something happened to Cam Ward and we're dealing with that fucking dumbass Tim Boyle or Brandon Allen, of course, the ship is probably going to sink again. But with Cam Ward under center, Calvin Ridley looked good last year. Like, I want you guys to understand that just because you looked at his stats and they weren't fantastic, doesn't mean the guy wasn't good. You have to watch the game sometimes, use your eye test, and truly see how you feel about a player, because he was 9th in explosive rating, 10th in yards per reception. So the guy was getting open, he was getting separation, and the team just couldn't hit him. Regardless of who was in at quarterback, they could not see him. It was John Cena style. So I think Calvin Ridley is a clear bounce back candidate, and I think he's a steal right now at ADP. At number 8, we got Rome Odunze of the Chicago Bears, wide receiver 36 off the board at pick 83, the 7.11. Now, Rome Odunze played last year. He has stats, but they're not really that good, right? So if you just, again, fall a victim to just looking at the stats, you might think this guy sucks donkey cock. You might think this guy is absolutely off the deep end. He's a bust after 1 year in the NFL. Bad luck or quarterback play, fantasy points data tweets, percent of open air yards that were uncatchable. A.D. Mitchell, 52%. Rome Odunze, 48%. So 48% of the time that this man was wide open, the ball wasn't even catchable. So that is very, very disappointing. And if you look at what Rome Odunze was viewed as coming into the NFL, Ron Stewart tweets, nothing to see here, just next-gen stats, 5 best wide receiver prospects since 2007. Alvin Johnson, number 1. Number 2, Rome Odunze. Number 3, Malik Nabers, who we originally talked about earlier on the video. So Rome Odunze was a very, very highly talked about prospect. But after 1 year, we're just magically kind of forgetting how we thought about him entering into his rookie year. And everything you hear out of the coaching staff feels very, very bullish on Rome Odunze. Ben Johnson calls Rome Odunze an offensive piece that he never really had in Detroit. To me, he fits that prototypical X-receiver, Johnson said, where you can line him up outside the numbers, and provided he gets a one-on-one with a corner, he's going to win most of his matchups. Slant routes, stop routes, go routes, you know, the whole route tree outside the numbers, and that's what I've seen from him so far. He's a really detailed route runner. When you have a long guy, that can win contested catches and torque down the field and all that, Johnson continues, but yet can still drop his weight and get in and out of routes like he can. That's really a unique skill set that we're gonna capitalize on. Now, I still think DJ Moore is the wide receiver 1 in terms of targets on the Bears, but it might end up being close. And while Caleb Williams didn't give us the best rookie season ever, we're not quitting on him, and we're not quitting on Rome Odunze. I think Ben Johnson's going to get the best out of Chicago Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze. And at the end of the year, you're going to be like, why was he coming off the board as the wide receiver 38? Next guy up here is Stefon Diggs of the New England Patriots, ADP wide receiver 38 at pick 85, the first pick inside of the 8th round. Stefon Diggs, 31 years old, and off an ACL tear, has not missed a single training camp practice. Earlier on in the offseason, There were thoughts, hey, maybe Stefon Diggs might not even be good to go for week 1, but now this guy hasn't even missed a single training camp practice. Stefon Diggs is absolutely dialed in for this season, and every single report I have read about Stefon Diggs has been nothing except for praise. There has not really been anyone shitting on what Diggs has been doing out there. He was the wide receiver 18 in PPR points per game last season, and he's had 15 plus PPR points per game in 5 straight seasons. In Buffalo, he did it in Houston, and he is going to do it this year, in my opinion, in New England. 8 games played last season. He tore his ACL week 8, missing the final 9 games of the season. In 8 games, he was averaging 8 targets per game, 5.9 receptions per game, 62 receiving yards per game, and he scored 4 total touchdowns. Half the games, he scored a touchdown. And this is with an offense that was loaded with wide receiver talent. They got Nico Collins, they've got Tank Dell, and they've got Stefon Diggs. You compare that to what is in New England, it is night and day. He had 4 of 8 games last season. Half of his games last year, he had over 18 points per game. And that's without him being the clear number 1 receiver in this offense in Houston. So imagine what's going to happen when he's the number 1 wide receiver in New England, clearly. I get there's hype for DeMario Douglas, Kyle Williams. There's guys that are getting talked up, and yeah, you know what? They deserve it. But none of those guys are Stefon Diggs. And again, I get he's coming off the ACL tear, so maybe he starts a little bit slow, but that doesn't matter when you're drafting a guy in the 8th round. 8th in route win rate last year, 18th in true catch rate, 26th in target separation. The stats don't lie. Diggs still got it. At number 10, we got Ricky Pearsall, Slick Rick of the 49ers, ADP wide receiver 44, pick 99, the 3rd pick inside of the 9th round. Recent report from August 7th, 49ers general manager John Lynch said there is still no timetable for Juwan Jennings. Jennings initially strained his calf in the offseason. Per Lynch, Jennings came out, practiced some, and wasn't feeling great on July 27th, so they put him off to the side to recover. While Jennings rehabs his calf injury and Brandon Ayuk works his way back from the ACL and MCL tear, likely to be put on the PUP, Ricky Pearsall continues to hone his connection with Brock Purdy. So we could start the year off with all of the competition for Ricky Pearsall. Snap, they're gone. They're not there. They're not available to play in week number 1. So that means that Ricky Pearsall week 1 is probably going to be the wide receiver 1 on this roster. And if he continues to build that connection with quarterback Brock Purdy, then when Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk come back, then it's very possible that Ricky Pearsall is still his number 1 target. And Ricky Pearsall only played 11 games in his rookie year. Why? Because the motherfucker got shot. The guy tried to take his Rolex. You know what Ricky said? He said, fuck no, baby. He took the guy's gun, shot the motherfucker, and took his Rolex back. That's the kind of play that you want out of the wide receiver you draft in fantasy. That's the kind of guy that doesn't give up. That's the kind of guy that wants every yard. Now, realistically, if I was Ricky, I'm a bit of a pussy. If I had all the money that Ricky's got, I'm giving the guy the watch. I'll get a new one. It's all good, Chief. But Ricky, he stands on business, and he took his Rolex back. So I got a lot of respect for him. And he popped in a couple of games last season. Up against the Bucs, he was the wide receiver 13, 17.3 points. Week 17 up against the Lions, Brian Branch put on skates, 28.7 points, number 7 at the wide receiver position. In week 18 up against the Cardinals, wide receiver 14, 18.9 points in that game. Now, Ricky, to me, was a guy that I was pretty nervous about earlier on the offseason, but with so many injuries going around in San Francisco, they've been hit by the injury bug yet again. Ricky Pearsall has a great shot at being the wide receiver 1 in an offense that I expect to be fireworks. Shout out to Katy Perry, because baby, you're a firework. Shout out to Kim Jong-un in that movie, not the real guy. You know what I'm talking about, because baby, you're a firework. The Interview, I think is what that movie's called. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you didn't enjoy today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. Check out my draft guide. Link in the video description over on Patreon. Check out Underdog. Promo code Notorious. Get your free pick. First time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash, as well as getting my draft guide sent to you the next day. I love you long time. Check out one of the videos on screen if you haven't seen it already. As always, good boy.